Good afternoon. I'd like to open my talk with a quote from the Buddha. All that we are is the result of what we have thought. It is founded on our thoughts. It is made up of our thoughts. If a man speaks or acts with an evil thought, pain follows him as the wheel follows the foot of the ox that draws the wagon. All that we are is the result of what we have thought. It is founded on our thoughts. It is made up of our thoughts. If a man speaks or acts with a pure thought, happiness follows him, like a shadow that never leaves. So these are the first two verses in the Dhammapada, which are a collection of sayings by the Buddha in the Pali tradition. And I came across this quote that we are the result of our thoughts pretty early in my exposure to Buddhism. I found the line very powerful and intriguing. And at the time I thought, wow, it means that my mind creates my body and it creates the world around me, like physically. But after some years of practice, my interpretation now is that we are whoever we believe ourselves to be. And this is because I've come to appreciate how much narratives and storytelling gives meaning and direction to our lives. So this past winter at the Abbey, we did a 3-month Vajrasattva purification retreat where we expressed regrets for past harmful deeds and we vowed never to do them again. And I found this experience to be very intense, to say the least, looking at all my bad behavior within that compressed time frame. And Venerable Children had given some teachings at the beginning of the retreat about identities and how clinging to them actually limits who we are. And this is because defining ourselves by what makes us different cuts us off from the rest of humanity and creates a whole bunch of categories of others, some of which are hostile. So during the retreat, I was able to see how much suffering my identities had caused me throughout my life and how they had driven me to commit many of the misdeeds that I was trying to purify. So I ended up focusing a lot during the retreat on trying to let go of these identities. The retreat was silent, so I was also able to look at a lot of the internal dialogue I had about myself, about others, about the world around me. And I found myself repeating the mantra, I'm an outsider that nobody understands. It's always been that way, and it always will be that way. So I tried to use some of the thought training methods that we practice in Tibetan Buddhism, and I was able to reframe this experience of separation to say that I'm someone who sometimes experiences feelings of loneliness, and just like everyone else. And thankfully, there are teachings out there that will help me to overcome these feelings. I think it's pretty easy to recognize when other people are interpreting events or rewriting events to fit their same familiar story of who they are and how others are treating them. But it's harder to see our own scripts because we usually don't realize that we're writing them. They just seem like fact. And it's also easy to see how harmful certain worldviews are that are held by other groups, like ones that advocate violence or discrimination against certain groups of people. But looking at ourselves, do we believe that there are certain parts of our body or mind that are completely unacceptable and must be eliminated before we can love our whole being? I certainly have had ideas like this, and they've driven me to be obsessed with my appearance and to create a lot of non-virtue trying to fit in or to impress other people. Do we tell ourselves that it's a cruel world, that it's every person for him or herself, and that we're all alone in trying to get what we need? I've also had thoughts like this, and these kinds of stories can lead us to commit a lot of antisocial behavior and even violent behavior. Or maybe we're telling ourselves the story that we're a screw up, we're stupid, we're never going to get it right, so why bother? And this becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy that, of course, prevents us from actually making a difference in our own and others' lives. So I think the main flaw in all of these scripts is the fantasy of a separate self that exists independently from everything and everyone else. And this fiction ignores how we actually exist, which is due to the kindness of others, and it ignores the fact that we can really have a positive influence on each other and others' lives. And it takes a really long time to let go of this belief in the separate sense of self, which is the highest goal in Buddhism. But in the meantime, we can start to examine our thoughts and emotions and look at the stories we tell ourselves about who we are and who others are, to challenge these stories with logic and reasoning, and then to replace them with healthier identities and narratives. So I'm currently working on dismantling my story of being an outsider and replacing it with the view that I'm a sentient being, just like everyone else. And instead of seeing others as threats, I remind myself that we all want happiness and we don't want to suffer. And that instead of being self-centered, expressing love, compassion, and kindness are actually the best ways to avoid suffering and help others too. And I also try to focus less on my past and who I used to be, and focus on the future and the present moment, take advantage of it to try to transform my mind. And I'm also very encouraged to look around and see that there are other people who are walking the same path to develop a good heart, and many other people who would be interested in the Buddhist teachings too, if they had the chance to hear them. So today, I'd like to ask or invite you to ask yourself, what stories am I telling myself today?